They say children once heard the land better than any of us ever could. Its breath, its rhythm, its cracks beneath their sandals, and the warmth of wind on their cheeks. The native peoples didn't just live beside nature, they breathed the same air as it. They knew how to apologize to the fish they caught, and they thanked the tree before cutting it for warmth. Now, it's quiet here. But if you stop, truly stop, you might still hear history whispering through the grass, and the river remembering names. I've walked this place more than once. But only once did I understand, sometimes even animals don't just survive. They remember. And they save. Long ago, when the winds of the Great Plains still carried the smell of distant fires and the songs of spirits echoed across endless grasses, the Kiowa people lived beneath the wide, unbroken sky. Their camp was a cluster of painted teepees set against the rolling prairie, where horses grazed freely and children played in the dust. The air was alive with the rhythm of drums, the crackle of fires, and the whistle of wind sweeping over the land. It was here, in this timeless place, that two children grew beneath the watchful eyes of their father, the chief of their band. The girl was named Ilani, which meant eternal blossom. She carried a brightness in her eyes as if the sunlight itself had chosen to live within her. Her brother was Kichi, called the Brave, with a spirit restless as the thunder that rolled from the mountains. Their father, a man of solemn strength, wore a headband crowned with an eagle feather. His voice carried authority, but his hands, when guiding his children, were steady and gentle. To him, teaching was as sacred as hunting or leading. He believed that without harmony with the land, no warrior could stand strong. In the evenings, when the campfire painted long shadows across the teepee walls, the chief would tell stories. He spoke of the rivers that cut through the plains like silver snakes, of the bison whose hooves thundered like drums of war, and of the stars that were not just distant fires, but ancestors watching from the sky. Ayani listened with wide eyes, her fingers brushing beads sewn into her dress. Kichi sat closer to the flames, eager to imagine himself as the warriors in his father's tales. One night, their father placed a stone into Kichi's hand. "Strength," he said, "is not in how hard the stone is, but in knowing where to place it." To Ayani, he handed a willow branch. "Wisdom is like water. It bends, it flows, and it shapes the world without breaking." The children did not fully understand, but the words took root in their hearts. The days were full of learning. The children practiced riding ponies across the plain, their laughter carried on the wind. Ayani's braids streamed behind her as she clung to the mane, while Kichi urged his horse faster, daring the horizon itself. Sometimes they followed their mother to the river to gather herbs and roots, or they sat by the grandmothers who strung beads and whispered songs of old battles and lost loves. But always, it was their father's guidance that lingered most. He showed them how to track the prints of deer, how to move silently through tall grass, and how to thank the earth when they took from it. "Every life you touch," he said, "must be honored. The land gives, and the land can take away. You must learn to walk as part of it, not above it." One afternoon, as storm clouds gathered over the plains, Ayani asked, "Father, why does the sky grow angry?" He placed his hand on her shoulder and said, "The sky is never angry, child. It reminds us of its power so that we do not forget our place. Fear does not make us weak, forgetting does." Kichi watched lightning crack open the horizon and felt his chest stir with the fire of both fear and wonder. When the rain came, it drummed on the hides of the teepees and hissed in the grass. The children huddled close, listening to the roar of nature, and their father's voice rose above the storm. "Remember this sound. The earth speaks, the sky answers, and we live between them. This is the way of the Kiowa." And so Ayani and Kichi grew, cradled by stories, shaped by wind, fire, and water. They did not yet know that their lives would one day entwine with the fate of small, furred creatures by the river, or that their names would become part of a story carried in whispers long after the fires of their camp turned cold. But the first lessons of harmony, courage, and listening to the world around them had already begun to shape the path that awaited. The spring storms came suddenly to the Great Plains, as if the sky itself split apart in anger. Black clouds rolled like a herd of bison, and the thunder shook the earth beneath the camp. Rain hammered against the hides of the teepees, ran in rivulets through the grass, and filled every hollow with water. Ayani and Kichi clung to one another as the wind howled, and their father moved through the camp, steady as stone, ensuring that no fire was lost to the storm. When at last the thunder faded into the distance and the storm passed, the world smelled of fresh earth and wet sage. The sun broke through the clouds, painting the prairie with a sharp, golden light. The air was heavy with moisture, and drops clung to the tips of the long grasses, sparkling like beads. Ayani tugged at her brother's arm. "The nets," she said, remembering the fish traps set in the river. Kichi, always eager for adventure, agreed at once. Their father nodded his permission. "Go, but tread carefully. The storm changes more than the sky, it changes the river as well." The children set off, their moccasins sinking into the damp ground. They followed a narrow path that wound between cottonwoods and willows, the scent of wet bark rich in the air. The river was swollen, its waters running faster than before, carrying broken branches and clumps of grass downstream. As they neared a fallen willow tree, a sound reached them through the soft rush of water, a faint, pitiful squeaking. Ayani froze. "Do you hear that?" Kichi frowned, tilting his head. The sound came again, high and desperate. They pushed through the wet reeds, and there, in a hollow of mud and tangled roots, they found two small creatures. They were kits, young beavers, drenched and shivering. Their fur was plastered to their bodies, and their tiny paws scrabbled helplessly in the slick mud. One gave a weak cry and tried to climb onto a log, only to slip back down. The storm had likely washed away their lodge, leaving them stranded and alone. Ayani knelt immediately, her hands hovering just above the trembling creatures. Her dark eyes softened. "They will not live if we leave them," she whispered. Kichi, though cautious, felt his chest tighten at their helplessness. He crouched beside his sister, reaching out. The kids pressed together, too weak to resist, and Kichi carefully scooped one into his arms. It was surprisingly light, its body trembling like a leaf in the wind. Ayani cradled the other, stroking its wet fur with her small fingers. The beaver kits blinked up at the children, their tiny whiskers twitching, as if they, too, were deciding whether to trust. For a moment, the siblings were silent, the world around them filled only with the rush of the river and the faint whimpers of the creatures. Then Kichi spoke. "What if their mother returns?" His voice was uncertain. Ayani shook her head. "The river has taken her. The storm was too strong. Now they have only us." Kichi looked down at the kit in his arms. Its tiny heart beat fast against his hand, fragile but alive. He nodded slowly, his eyes meeting Ayani's. "Then we will keep them safe." With care, the children wrapped the beaver kits in soft scraps of cloth they carried at their belts. They turned back toward the camp, their steps slower now, each of them glancing at the small lives they carried. The river roared behind them, indifferent and eternal, but within the arms of two children, new bonds were forming, fragile threads of trust and destiny that neither Ayani nor Kichi yet understood. That day, as the sun lowered and the earth steamed with the memory of the storm, the Kiowa children carried home not just two trembling animals, but the beginning of a story that would bind their lives to the river forever. The days after the storm brought a different rhythm to Ayani and Kichi's lives. The beaver kits, so small and fragile at first, quickly became the center of their world. The children made a small enclosure by the stream, weaving branches together the way they had seen their people bind fish traps. It was not a lodge, but it was safe, and the running water nearby soothed the frightened animals. Ayani named the stronger one Karma, meaning water spirit, for the way he darted toward the current without fear. The smaller one, gentler and slower, she called Nita, the bear, because of the soft roundness of her face. Kichi had laughed at first, but the name stayed. Soon the siblings were calling them as if they had always been part of the family. Every morning the children brought fresh willow branches for their new companions. Karma learned to chew eagerly, stripping bark with surprising speed, while Nita would sit patiently, using her tiny paws as if she were carefully choosing the best pieces. The children marveled at the way the animals moved, awkward on land, yet graceful in water. When the sun grew high and the air shimmered with heat, Ayani and Kichi would slip into the river with them. At first, the kits clung nervously to the edges, but with time they followed the children into the deeper pools. Games soon began: who could reach the opposite bank faster, who could carry a branch the longest, who could make the biggest splash. Kichi's laughter rang out, bold and wild, while Ayani's voice was softer, encouraging, always coaxing the timid Nita forward. Some evenings, when the sky glowed red and gold, the children sat by the stream watching the beavers practice carrying sticks. Kichi began to pretend they were warriors training for battle, chanting mock war cries, while Ayani imagined they were builders of a secret village hidden beneath the river. "Look," she would whisper, "they understand us. They know we are playing." And indeed, Karma and Nita would paddle with purpose, as if the game itself gave them joy. Their father noticed the bond growing between his children and the animals. At first, he said little, but one night, as he stood near the fire, he spoke. "The world gives companions when our hearts are open. Do not think of them as pets. Think of them as teachers. Watch closely, for the animals carry lessons we forget." Ayani pondered these words. She saw how Karma, fearless, still paused to wait for Nita when she lagged behind. She noticed how Nita, though smaller, never gave up, struggling again and again to climb a slick log until she succeeded. These were lessons of courage and patience, lessons as real as those her father taught with stones and willow branches. By midsummer, the bond between children and animals was unshakable. When Ayani awoke, she looked first toward the stream, listening for the familiar splashes. When Kichi returned from riding ponies with the other boys, he would race to see if Karma would challenge him to another game. Even the elders of the camp began to smile at the sight: two Kiowa children and their strange companions, laughing, splashing, growing together under the vast sky. But beneath the joy, time moved steadily forward. The beavers grew stronger. Their coats thickened, their bodies heavier, their play more skillful. And though Ayani and Kichi tried to ignore it, a quiet truth began to stir within them. One day, Karma and Nita would have to return to the river's greater flow, to live as all creatures must, free and untethered. For now, though, the days belonged to friendship. Under the blazing sun and the whisper of the tall grass, Ayani and Kichi carried no worries. They had found something rare, a bond as natural as the river itself, and as fleeting as the summer that carried it. As summer stretched long across the plains, the river slowly returned to calm. The violent storms of spring were forgotten, replaced by warm evenings scented with sage and the hum of cicadas. Ayani and Kichi spent every day by the water, but something had begun to change. Karma and Nita were no longer the helpless creatures rescued from the mud. Their bodies had grown strong, their movements steady, their eyes bright with a confidence the children had never seen before. One morning, Ayani noticed how easily Karma broke thick willow branches with his teeth, dragging them through the current as if training for some greater task. Nita, smaller but determined, swam further each day, no longer afraid of deeper waters. The children watched with pride, yet unease stirred quietly within them. "Do you think they will stay?" Ayani asked her brother one evening as the sky burned orange above the horizon. Her fingers toyed with a strand of grass, her voice uncertain. Kichi frowned. "Why wouldn't they? We built them a place. We feed them. They are ours now." But even as he spoke, he remembered their father's words: animals were not possessions, but teachers. And teachers did not remain forever. The answer came one morning in late summer. The air was cool, carrying the first whispers of autumn. The children went down to the stream, expecting the playful splashes of their companions. Instead, they found Karma and Nita waiting at the edge of the water. The beavers did not rush to greet them. They lingered, still and quiet, as though listening to a voice the children could not hear. Ayani stepped closer, her heart tightening. "Karma?" "Nita," she called softly. The animals looked at her, their dark eyes reflecting both trust and distance. Then, with slow, deliberate movements, they slipped into the current. Kichi waded knee-deep into the water, his voice breaking. "Wait! Don't go!" But the beavers did not turn back. They swam side by side, following the river's pull, their sleek bodies gliding with the ease of creatures who belong to its endless path. Ayani stood frozen, her hands pressed to her chest. She felt tears rise but held them back, her father's lessons echoing in her mind. "Every life you touch must be honored," she whispered. "They are not leaving us. They are finding their way." Kichi, fists clenched, stood beside her in silence. Only when the beavers were no more than ripples in the distance did he speak. "Will they return?" His voice was quiet, almost pleading. Their father had been standing nearby, watching. He placed a steady hand on Kichi's shoulder. "We do not know, my son. Children grow, and one day they walk their own road. So it is with the animals. What matters most is not the parting, but the gift you shared with them." The words struck deep. Ayani wiped her eyes, and Kichi lowered his gaze, his chest heavy with the ache of loss. Yet beneath the sorrow lay something else, the faint glow of pride, the knowledge that they had given the beavers strength enough to follow the river's call. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the plains, Ayani and Kichi sat together by the quiet stream. The water whispered against the banks, carrying with it memories of laughter, games, and gentle trust. Though their companions had gone, the bond remained, woven not into cages or walls, but into the children's hearts, where no current could wash it away. The camp settled into night, fires flickering like stars fallen to earth. Above, the true stars glimmered, eternal and watchful. Ayani tilted her face to the sky and thought of Karma and Nita, swimming beneath the same heavens. She whispered a promise only the river could carry: "Wherever you go, may the water keep you safe." And so ended the summer of companionship, leaving Ayani and Kichi older in spirit, their innocence touched by the first taste of farewell. The river flowed on, patient and eternal, as if waiting for the day when paths once parted might one day cross again. A year passed since the summer of farewell, and the Great Plains changed their face. Where once the grasses had rolled green and endless, now they lay yellow and brittle beneath the crushing heat. The wind carried not the scent of rain, but the acrid taste of dust. The sun ruled without mercy, pressing down upon the land until even the strongest trees bowed and the streams shrank to thin, reluctant trickles. For the Kiowa, the season was a trial. Horses grew restless with thirst, their ribs showing through their hides. Women walked farther each day to find roots and herbs, returning weary and bent beneath the weight of their baskets. Children no longer played as freely, their laughter muted, replaced by the hollow sound of coughs stirred by the dry air. Ayani felt the heaviness of the drought most when she looked at the riverbank. Where once she had run to meet splashes of water and the playful shadows of beavers, now she found cracked mud and silence. She would kneel, pressing her palms against the earth as though to will the water back. But the ground only answered with its stillness. Kichi carried the drought in his shoulders. He trained harder, running with the other boys, practicing with bow and spear. Yet even his proud energy faltered when he saw the elders gather around the fire, their brows drawn tight. He overheard words not meant for children, words of hunger, of sickness, of worry for the herds that wandered further each day in search of grass. Their father tried to keep the spirit of the camp alive. Each night, he called the people to the circle, where drums beat slowly and voices lifted in song. He reminded them of the resilience of their ancestors, of the strength that came from unity. "The land tests us," he said. "But the Kiowa endure. As long as we honor the earth, we will not be forsaken." Yet even as he spoke, the flames of the fire revealed the weariness etched in his face. Ayani saw it when his voice faltered, and Kichi noticed the moments he stared too long into the horizon, as though searching for answers in the endless sky. Life in the village carried on, though each day felt thinner, stretched like hide pulled too tight. Women stitched clothing from deer hides with quiet determination. Men sharpened arrowheads and repaired spears, knowing that hardship often invited danger from beyond. Children carried water skins heavier than their arms could bear, learning too early the weight of survival. In this season of dryness, Ayani and Kichi clung to memory. At times they sat together by the faded stream, recalling the days when Karma and Nita swam at their side. Ayani whispered, "Do you think they remember us?" Kichi's answer was gruff, but softer than before. They are wild now. They live as they must. But even as he said it, he could not shake the quiet hope that their companions might one day return. As the drought deepened, the land itself seemed to grow brittle, waiting for a spark. The elders spoke in hushed tones of prairie fires, of winds that could turn a single flame into a wall of death. At night, the horizon glowed faintly with far-off burns, and the people of the Kiowa prayed the winds would not turn toward them. The summer dragged on, heavy and unrelenting. Days blurred into one another, each marked by thirst and labor. Yet beneath the suffering, a quiet strength grew within Ayani and Kichi. They had tasted friendship, learned the ache of loss, and now faced the weight of survival. Though they did not yet know it, the season of fire was approaching, and with it, a test that would burn their memories into legend. The drought did not break. Day after day, the sun blazed like a burning shield above the Great Plains, and the wind carried only dust. The grasses, once tall and waving, now lay brittle and dry, whispering like parchment beneath the hooves of horses. The elders warned that the land had become tinder, waiting for the smallest spark. And when the spark came, it arrived with the cruelty of fate. It began on the western horizon, a thin line of smoke curling upward, almost invisible against the white haze of the sky. At first, the people thought little of it. Fires sometimes burned far away, dying before they reached the camps. But this time, the wind shifted. By midday, the smoke thickened, and a faint red glow shimmered in the distance. The scent of burning sage and grass reached the village. Ayani stood frozen, her heart pounding as she watched the horizon. Kichi's fists clenched at his sides, his jaw set. Their father's voice rang out across the camp, steady and commanding. "Gather your things. Take the children, the elders. Move toward the riverbed." Panic rippled through the camp. Women hurried to roll hides, to pack food and medicine. Men led horses toward the path eastward, their eyes darting to the approaching wall of smoke. Children cried, clutching at their mothers' skirts. Drums were silenced, fire smothered, but the greater fire advanced, unstoppable. The siblings followed their father's orders, carrying water skins and guiding the younger children. The air grew hotter, thick with ash that stung their eyes. Overhead, the sky darkened, not with clouds but with smoke, swirling and writhing like a living thing. The glow grew brighter, an orange hunger devouring the horizon. By the time they reached the dry riverbed, flames were visible. Tall grasses caught like torches, snapping and hissing, sending sparks into the air. The fire moved as if alive, leaping forward with every gust of wind. Horses whinnied in terror, pulling at their reins, their nostrils flared with panic. Ayani clutched Kichi's hand. "There is no water," she whispered. Her eye swept the empty channel where once the river had flowed. Cracks split the mud, mocking their desperation. The truth weighed heavy, the riverbed could not save them. The chief stood tall, his eagle feather trembling in the heated wind. He scanned the horizon, searching for hope. Around him, people huddled close, covering their faces with cloth, trying to breathe through the choking smoke. The fire roared closer, a wall of sound and fury. Kichi tried to be brave, holding Ayani behind him, but fear cut through his chest like a knife. He looked at his father, waiting for a command, a miracle. The chief's voice broke through the chaos, "Stand together. If the spirits mean for us to survive, the path will open." The flames raced nearer, and the heat was unbearable, as though the very air sought to burn them alive. Sparks fell like rain, igniting patches of grass near their feet. Mothers cried out, shielding their children. The people pressed closer into the cracked riverbed, as if walls of earth might hold back the inferno. Ayani's eyes filled with tears. She whispered a prayer, clutching the memory of cool water, of laughter by the stream, of two small creatures who had once brought joy to her heart. If only the river would return. If only. The fire roared, closer, louder, unstoppable. In that moment, it seemed the Kiowa had reached the edge of their world, and that nothing could stand between them and the fury of the burning plains. The fire bore down upon the people like a living beast, its roar drowning every sound but the pounding of terrified hearts. Ash filled the air until the sky itself seemed aflame. The Kiowa huddled in the dry riverbed, their faces streaked with sweat and soot, their eyes wide with dread. Mothers held children close, warriors gripped their spears though no weapon could strike down fire. Ayani clutched Keech's hand so tightly her knuckles whitened. The heat pressed in from every side, and despair was heavy as stone. And then, amid the thunder of flame, came another sound. A deep, steady crack, crack, splash. At first it seemed like an echo, or a trick of the panicked mind. But Ayani's ears caught it, and she lifted her head. The sound grew louder, wood splintering, water rushing. "Listen," she cried, pulling at her brother's arm. From the bend of the river upstream came movement. Dark shapes in the smoke, low to the ground, their teeth flashing as they tore into the old fallen trees that had blocked the water's path. The sound of gnawing echoed like drums of salvation. And then, with a sudden shudder, the logs broke free. Water burst forward. At first a trickle, then a rush, then a torrent. The dry cracks of the riverbed filled, mud giving way to shining current. The stream roared down toward the waiting people, clear and strong, meeting the fire head-on. Steam hissed into the sky as flames sputtered and died, smothered by the surge. Ayani gasped. Through the mist and smoke, she saw them, two great beavers, larger and stronger than she remembered. Their wet fur glistened in the fiery light, their eyes calm and fierce. Kama and Nita. They had returned. "Keechi! Look," she shouted, her voice breaking with joy. Keech's heart leapt as he recognized them. "It's them," he whispered, almost unable to believe. They came back. The river poured through the camp, wrapping the people in a shield of water. Flames that had moments before promised death now cracked and faltered, driven back by the flood. Horses stamped and whinnied but calmed as the air cooled. Warriors who had braced for the end now lifted their voices in astonished cries. The beavers did not linger in the shallows. They worked tirelessly, gnawing, dragging, shifting fallen branches, guiding the flow with practiced strength. More shapes appeared behind them, other beavers, answering the call of water and kin. Together, they carved a new channel, feeding the stream until it became a river once more. Ayani's tears spilled freely as she watched. "They remembered," she whispered. "They did not forget us." Keechi stood taller, his chest swelling with pride and awe. For the first time since the fire began, he felt the fear break inside him. Hope, bright and unstoppable, surged like the river itself. Their father raised his arms to the sky. "The spirits have answered. The river lives again." His voice carried above the roar of water, and the people lifted their cries in gratitude. The fire still burned across the plains, but it no longer threatened the camp. The current, swift and shining, split the inferno apart, forcing it to retreat. Steam rolled upward in great clouds, turning the setting sun into a glowing orb of red and gold. In that light, Ayani and Keechi saw their companions one last time. Kama and Nita swam side by side, their powerful bodies cutting through the current. They paused briefly, turning their dark eyes toward the children. It was not the gaze of helpless creatures saved from the mud, but of equals, friends who had returned in the hour of greatest need. Then, without hesitation, the beavers slipped back into the deeper waters, vanishing into the mist and the river's endless journey. The Kiowa stood in silence, the fire's roar replaced by the river's song. The people had been saved, not by blade or bow, but by the bond of kindness sown long ago between children and two small lives by the stream. When the flames finally died and the smoke drifted into the night, silence returned to the plains. The Kiowa stood along the banks of the river that now flowed strong once more, its waters gleaming in the glow of the campfires. Ash clung to their clothes, their faces were streaked with soot, yet their hearts beat with gratitude. They had faced the fire and survived. That night, the camp gathered in a great circle. The people sang prayers of thanks, their voices carrying into the dark sky. Drums echoed, not with fear, but with reverence. Mothers rocked their children, warriors laid down their weapons, and elders lifted their hands to the stars. The chief, weary but unbroken, stood before them, the eagle feather in his hair stirring with the night wind. Ayani and Kichi sat close to the fire, still trembling from what they had witnessed. Their eyes returned again and again to the river, half expecting to see two sleek shapes rise once more from the current. But the water rolled on quietly, as though guarding the secret of those who had saved them. Their father spoke, his voice carrying over the crackling flames. "Tonight we have seen what many forget: the world remembers kindness. When we honor the life around us, that life will return in our time of need. These waters flow because two small companions came back to us, not as helpless creatures, but as guardians." He paused, his gaze falling on his children. "Ayani, Kichi, you gave them your care when they were weak. And in return, when we were weak, they gave us strength. This is the circle of life on the plains. This is the way of the Kiowa." The people murmured their agreement, their eyes bright with wonder. Already the story began to take shape, passed from voice to voice. Some said the beavers were not mere animals, but spirits sent by the ancestors. Others whispered that the river itself had chosen to repay the children's kindness. Whatever the truth, the tale would live, carried in memory like a sacred song. As the fire burned low, Ayani leaned against her brother's shoulder. "Do you think we will see them again?" she asked softly. Kichi looked at the river, the moonlight dancing on its surface. He wanted to say yes, but instead he whispered, "Even if we don't, they are with us. Always." Their father lifted his hand toward the flowing water. "From this day, we call this place Beaver River. Let it remind us, and our children's children, that those who walk with kindness never walk alone. Who comes to the river with a good heart will one day find its blessing." The camp fell quiet, the only sound the murmur of the river weaving its way through the darkened land. Above, the stars shone cold and eternal, but in the hearts of the Kiowa burned a warmth that no fire could consume. Ayani closed her eyes, her mind filled with images of playful splashes, willow branches, and dark eyes full of trust. Kichi sat beside her, staring into the river until sleep claimed him. Together they dreamed of water, of laughter, of two companions whose memory would never fade. And so the tale of Beaver River was born, a story whispered at firesides, sung in the voices of elders, carried across generations. Long after the children had grown, long after their names had passed into history, the legend endured. On the Great Plains, where the wind still carries the smell of sage and the cry of eagles, the Kiowa would say, "Whoever comes to the river with goodness in their heart will find the river's gift in return."